St John the Baptist Church, Smalley in Derbyshire. Now, the most comprehensive account of this early church in Smalley is found in the writings of the Reverend Charles Kerry in his book Smalley, Its History and Legends from 1905, which I referred to a couple of times in this video. And when researching the church and the village, I read that it was a small village with scarcely any distinctive history of its own, but I tend to disagree. There she is. This large stump of this female yew tree is found as you enter the churchyard, and it's about 15 foot high, and it has a girth of 15 foot 7 inch when measured in 1983, and it is well rounded. It's still alive, look. It has this big gash on the side facing the church, and it reveals numerous internal stems, and it's filled with crumbling red heartwood and loads of fairies. There is a small sprouting of growth at the top, so it's still alive, but the metal banding in two places was intended to hold the tree together, but it's possible that these were not adjusted as the tree expanded and contributed to its demise. This once magnificent old yew tree, which was supposed to be the finest in Derbyshire at one time, is calculated to be about 800 years old, but as yews are notoriously difficult to age, it could be even older, especially when you look at the church's history. And I read that two of its limbs were severely damaged by two different storms and were removed in the mid-1800s. And because the tree was considered to be in perilous condition, in 1978 it was trimmed and more corsets were added with steel bands. Now, the Reverend Charles Kerry, who I mentioned earlier, is buried in the shade of the yew tree, and this is his red granite tomb at the side of the path, and it has an inscription on the tomb in Latin, which the translation I'll put on the screen. And the Reverend Kerry bequeathed money to the church to finance the building of the bell tower and the provision of the bells, hence the bell on his tombstone. There is a mention of a church in Smalley in the Domesday records of 1086, but it's thought that there was a church on the same spot long before that, and I think indicated by the poor old yew tree that it's true. This is also substantiated by the finding in 1862 of an oblong gritstone with an incised cross when excavating a grave. Now, this is considered to show features of the period of the Roman Empire, and the Reverend Kerry described it as the greatest antiquarian treasure in Smalley. But this medieval church was demolished in 1798. It was very dilapidated. And later the Reverend Kelly visited many of the parishioners seeking to record their memories of the old church, because there was very little written evidence of it. Another of the remnants from this church is a stone coffin lid which was discovered among the debris and is now placed on the south wall in the chancel, and it's thought to date to around the 11th century. Now, one of the local folk tales say there was a weathercock on top of the tower, and the tale concerns its collection from Derby. Now, the person who was supposed to collect it allegedly went on a drinking spree, as you do, and had to return without it as the landlord had kept the bird as security for his debts. Also, there was only two pews in the church, one being occupied by the Richardson Radfords. Now, the reference to the Richardson pew relates to the residents of Smalley Hall, who were great benefactors to the village, and Mrs. Richardson appeared in a later legend I'll tell in a bit. It's a lovely churchyard. Loads of paths off. See where this goes. Always wildlife havens, these churchyards, aren't they? Twitter of birds, scuttling of the squirrels, grumbling of the dog. Now, Smalley's name comes from the Anglo-Saxon for narrow woodland clearing, which, by happy accident, is where we're heading next. And the parish once formed part of a wide extent of woody pasture land, indicated by the name of the parishes, of course. And Smalley is mentioned in Morleston 100 in a charter of 1009 by King Ethelred the Unready, and it's relating to a manor known as Westtoon. I think this takes you to Morley Wood. We'll have a look if it's not too muddy. I've got the shoes for it. And of course you have the Viking raids which were going on in England, which began in 780 until September 1066, less than a month before the Norman conquest. So there would have been under Danelaw sometime during that time. A big overview. Now, I want to believe that Smalley village was connected with Bonnie Prince Charlie and the Jacobite rebellion of 1745. But apparently during the winter of 1745, Bonnie Prince Charlie marched south from Scotland, reaching Derby in December, and looted the town. And he stayed for 2 days before his fateful retreat as the Duke of Cumberland's army approached. And while staying in Derby, some of the Jacobites are said to have visited some of the nearby villages, including Smalley. And a group of Highlanders came to exchange their ponies for horses belonging to the then owner of Smalley Hall, Mrs. Richardson, leaving at least a dozen old pikes in a room adjoining the stables at the hall. These were later discovered, and I think they're on show somewhere. And there were another resident of the village who had a claymore, which was alleged to have been found locally. And apparently when this group of Scots who had visited the stables were returning to Derby, they met a chap called Woolley from Smalley, who was a coal carrier. And they hired him and his horse and cart to help them transport some heavy baggages. Now, on this retreat, the party with Woolley were surprised by some of the Royal Army, who pursued the Scots, leaving Woolley to shift for himself. So Woolley legged it quick, and his suspicion that the baggage he was carrying was part of the prince's treasure turned out to be correct. Finding himself rich enough to retire, he spent the rest of his life enjoying his ill-gotten gains. I also read this amusing bit. When the islanders turned up in Smalley, a large crowd of mainly women gathered, harassing the men. And on a command from the commander, the regiment stooped and threw their kilts over their heads, revealing everything to the astonished ladies. And apparently they were not troubled with crowds of women after that. Bridge. Get down where that slipping, we'll have a look. It's pretty well collapsed, but it looks interesting. Yeah, this side's pretty good. Looks like someone might be living under the top over there. Not the weather for that. That's interesting growth. Is it 1 3 or 3 joined? I think it's 3 joined. easy sunlight. Gorgeous. It's cold, but it's beautiful. I did read somewhere, I can't remember when, probably on YouTube I saw it, that this wood is haunted by kilted soldiers or something. I have to do some research. Oh, but you're good lad, aren't you, Marley? He's also good on his aim. He used to be with Ziggy, but he misses him, bless. But it is good. Mischievous, but good. God, it's stretching out into a long, drawn-out bit of woodland there. I don't know how much further we can get, but we're here. You have to peel up everything. There's a bridge over the brook. Right, it opens first now. It's going to look over there. There's a right away. We'll see if there's anything up there. Look at that. Come out in soft shoes to walk around a churchyard and end up wading down fields. Should know better at my age. Expect the unexpected. I think Marley's off chasing squirrels again. He'll never catch him. Wouldn't know what to do with it if you did, would you, Marley?